Good morning and welcome to the Kite Trust's hour-long session on supporting LGBTQ plus visibility. And welcome to Pride Month 2021. You'll see that I've got the progress flag here, which is being increasingly displayed and now includes black and brown chevrons for people of colour. And the pink and blue for trans identities, which is very timely in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement and on the 50th anniversary of Pride in 2019. It was widely used as it recognised the contributions of the American activists Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera to the Stonewall protests back in 1969. And having the chevrons on the left of the flag indicate that there is still progress to be made. So that's a little blurb about the flag. My name is Bethan. I'm the Programme Manager for Schools and Training for the Kite Trust. And I use the pronouns she, her. Please feel free to add your pronouns to your Zoom title. You'll see that I've got mine there, and Josie's also got hers in her title. The Kite Trust is the largest LGBTQ plus youth organisation in the east of England, but we provide training pretty much around the kind of south of England, north of the river in London, and we've had a few sessions that we've worked with the Pitt rivers in the last couple of months, so that's been really positive. So welcome this morning, and we're going to do a few activities. We are recording the session, so feel free to keep your camera off, but please do contribute, participate as and when you feel that you would like to. So, back to basics. What do we mean by LGBTQ? And it's not a trick question. Feel free to put it in the chat or to unmute yourself and just speak. Okay, so, and I'm sure that people are aware, we're talking about lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and questioning, or you might see Q as representing queer. We use questioning in the Kite Trust because the majority of the young people that come into our services are either exploring their gender identity, their sexuality, or both. So any comments? Is everybody happy with those definitions? Thank you for adding that to the chat. You'll see that bisexual or bi is a fairly broad definition. So not just referring to the binary of man and woman, but does talk about other genders. And the difference in the colour in terms of lesbian, gay and bisexual and the trans in green. Any ideas as to why we might have used different colours for those terms? Again, not a trick question. Thank you. Got in the chat. Thank you, Jonah. Yeah, sexuality compared with gender identity, absolutely. So the LGB, the red terms, represent sexuality, and the T, the trans, and the green represents gender identity. This is a graphic that we use with young people when they first come into our services, which clearly separates out gender identity, sex assigned at birth, and attraction. And within that, we've separated gender expression from gender identity. They may not always correspond, particularly for people who have trans experience or who identify as trans. They may not feel able to express their gender in a way that corresponds with their gender identity for all sorts of reasons, particularly related to prejudice and discrimination, and statistics that we see, for example, around workplace gender expression shows that people are still not confident to express their gender in the workplace for fear of discrimination. And also your gender expression may change over time. So for example, my daughter as a small child loved frills and frocks. At 19, wouldn't be seen in either of those. So your gender expression may change depending on your context. We use the term, and we recommend the use of the term sex assigned at birth because it accurately describes how a newborn's sex is determined. It is generally determined through the observation of genitals. And if the genitals are unambiguous, then a baby will be assigned female or male. In the UK, you can't be assigned anything else in terms of your birth certificate. Male or female have to be recorded on your birth certificate. And we'll come back to that in a minute, or to sex assigned at birth. And attraction here you'll see is broken down to physical attraction and emotional attraction, which again may correspond, may not. And you may have romantic attraction without necessarily having physical attraction. And they are not necessarily linked in any way with gender identity. So sexuality and gender identity are two separate concepts. So going to the Q plus, having looked at LGB, so the LGB would correspond with the attraction graphics in the previous slide, and the T with the gender identity. So have a look at these 6 terms. Again, this is not a test, and it's not an attempt to label or pigeonhole people. But they are terms that are generally used currently, and ones that are worth knowing for when you are speaking to or interacting with the LGBTQ plus community or members of the community. So rather than put people into breakout rooms, I'm just going to ask you now, how would you define these terms, and do you think they describe gender identity, sex assigned at birth, or attraction? So we'll just take a couple of moments to look at that.
They're all of those things. So some things are gender identity, some of the words relate to sexual preference, and some are related to, what was the other one? Well,
sex,
yes.
Attraction and gender identity, they are, but some belong to one category and others belong to another. So can you categorize them according to which they describe? And I'm just going to look at the question from Jonah. Do you keep it short for it to be easy to write, to understand? I think we're talking about the acronym, yeah. So we've got, or do you don't deal with other aspect, e.g. asexuality, intersex? Absolutely. I think you can have LGBTIAQ plus. I think Josie said that's what you use at Pitt Rivers. I think that there are all sorts of different acronyms, and I think there's the reason we have a plus at the end is so that we can kind of say, well, and other related identities, because the more letters we add on, the more likely we are to miss somebody out, if that makes sense. So you'll see, yeah, a combination of LGBT plus, LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA, LGBTIQA, all sorts. But having the plus there is a useful I guess, note for it. So we've got cis or cisgender and non-binary related to gender, absolutely. Intersex related to sex assigned at birth. Queer, pan and asexual or ace relating to sexuality. Absolutely, thank you. Any comments on any of the definitions?
I often use queer as more of an umbrella term that covers gender identity,
Yes.
or sexual preference, rather than relating it only to sexuality.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. And so I would have put that in between the two, if you like. So you might have genderqueer, somebody who describes themselves as genderqueer, and queer is also used as an umbrella term for the LGBTQ plus community. Yeah, and you might well see queer community as an alternative to the acronym. Totally. Any comments on the term queer? Because you will get people who will not use it.
We've definitely received some backlash. I know Beth, who's in the call, but I don't know Jonah, so I don't know how much you know about the museum, Jonah, but I work at the Pitt Rivers, and we've got a big exhibition on at the moment, and we use the word queer with lots of confidence, but we definitely have received some complaints from people.
Right.
So I suppose it's just being mindful, isn't it, that it's not a term.
Yeah.
So it's complaints from people in the community, that is, also people who aren't in the community. So it's just being mindful, isn't it, that not everyone's going to be okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jonah has just put in the chat that it's been reclaimed since the 80s. Absolutely. But I guess people who were subjected to it as a homophobic slur back in the 80s still feel that it's not a positive term.
You know what's interesting? I feel like most of backlash that I have received, because I put on LGBT History Month, and the backlash against queer I received from cis and hetero allies rather than from queer people.
Right. Yeah.
Especially, you know, like, as I said, since queer has been reclaimed since the 80s, even people who have kind of had the word used against them, like, they are the architects of reclaiming it, right? So I feel like the blame lays not on them as our elders, but on kind of allies that are not educated in
Okay, that's an interesting point. Thank you. And I guess maybe not blaming anybody might be a like trying to talk allies through why it's a positive term now. So it would be good if we did have some allies here. And when the young people that we meet, many are really, really keen on the use of the term queer, because it's a powerful term, it's a political term. And, you know, we've got queer politics, queer theory, queer arts, and it also affords us as members of the community a certain privacy. So we don't have to be explicit about who we fancy or what we've got in our trousers. And so it is a very powerful term. I guess what we recommend when we deliver training on terminology is that people mirror the language that that members of the community use to describe themselves, and that allies use it with caution, but that they educate themselves about the history of the term. And thank you, Josie. Yeah, you've had experience of allies who struggle with the word queer. I guess it's because they might not be so up to date with kind of ongoing discussions around it. So yeah. So the definitions, but by no means definitive definitions. and I'd be interested to hear any comments around these definitions. Whenever we undertake this activity, cis or cisgender is generally the term that is the least known amongst participants, because anybody who identifies as cisgender has probably never had to explain their gender identity to anyone. And as we live in a cis-normative society, it's not a word that we have to use very often, but a very powerful word to demonstrate allyship with the trans community. Any comments or any questions about any of those definitions? I guess it's important to mention that somebody who identifies as ace, although they might not be motivated by sexual attraction, it doesn't mean that they don't have sex. Thanks, Jonah, for your comments. And as I mentioned, in this country, you can only be registered on your birth certificate as male or female, not as intersex. Although it's estimated that 1.7% of the population is intersex, which is the same as people with naturally red hair, so more people than we might think. Everyone happy with the definitions there? Any queries, any questions about any of the definitions? So I'm just checking the chat. Thanks, Jonah. All good. Okay. And so I just wanted to highlight some of the terms that we would recommend avoiding, and the ones that we would suggest as substitutes or as replacements are in brackets. Transsexual is still the term that is in the Equality Act and in the Gender Recognition Act, despite Women and Equalities Committee trying to get it changed back in 2016. But transsexual carries connotations of medical or surgical interventions, and is linked with, in some sort of way, is linked with sexuality because of the term sexual being in the word. And both transsexual and transvestite have taken on connotations of maybe comedic connotations or a kind of fetishistic ideas, not least from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and so not really positive. You'll see that transvestite we've got in there with cross-dresser in amber. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Yeah, yes, transsexual is still in the act. And people still use the term transsexual to describe themselves as well. And so, you know, that's fine, but it's not a term that we would recommend. The reason I've got cross-dresser in amber is because it's not an ideal alternative. It still carries judgmental connotations because who is, you know, whose place is it to decide whether somebody is cross-dressing or not? And generally a woman in trousers would not be seen as cross-dressing, whereas a man in a skirt, if they're not in national dress, would be seen as cross-dressing potentially. And is that something to do with society's idea that, you know, men would be deprivileging themselves by dressing as women? And so it's not an ideal alternative, but preferable to transvestite. And transvestite, and people who identify or people who cross-dress, sorry, may not identify as trans. They may, but they may not. Okay. And then coming to homosexual, the term has been used to to prosecute and persecute, and so is not a happy term in terms of the history of LGBTQ, or in terms of LGBTQ history. And so gay, again, is preferable. And then hermaphrodite, fine for earthworms and in a biology class, but intersex is the term for humans. And sex assigned at birth is a more accurate description of what happens when a baby is born, rather than natal or born, female or male, although you will see that on a number of forms, not least NHS forms. But that kind of emphasizes the essentialism of biology compared with the idea of using the term sex assigned at birth. And any term that refers to gender as being something that is a choice should be replaced with something like true gender, confirmed gender. Preferred, no, and acquired, you'll see as well, which sounds like it's something you've either caught, like a disease, or something you've gone out and bought in a shop. So please, yeah, don't use either of those. Any other terms that people would like to look at or to talk about? Okay. So moving on, just a quick link to the Equality Act. So sex, in terms of a protected characteristic, covers men and women. It doesn't cover intersex. Sexual orientation covers all sexualities. And then gender reassignment, as it is still called in the Act, and that's where it talks about transsexual identity. It covers people who are proposing to undergo, are undergoing, or have undertaken a process to change, and it does say his or her gender. It doesn't require a person to be under medical supervision to be protected, but it doesn't cover non-binary people, which is why it refers to changing his or her gender. However, there was a legal case in 2020 brought against Jaguar, where a non-binary employee brought a case of discrimination, and it was ruled that they had breached the Equality Act, and so there may well be the establishment of case law to cover non-binary identities in future. So, and I guess important to note that the right to be protected from discrimination supersedes the right to discriminate. Okay, I'm going to give you a poll. So let me know if you can't see this, because I'm not sure if you've got a phone that it will show. Are people able to see the poll? Jonah says yes. Okay, you have 9 questions, so take a couple of minutes and we'll go through it afterwards. So looking at, sorry, where are we talking about the age of consent? Good question. These are UK legislation. It's all UK legislation. Okay, I should have said that. UK, which includes, yeah, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So folks could take a couple of minutes to have a look at these and then we'll go through them. Okay, Josie, I'll read out. Well, I'll read them out when I will read them out now, actually, so that you can have time to think about it. What year did the Stonewall riots take place? So there's the choice of A, 1969, B, 1989, C, 1999. And then number 2, when was the age of consent legalized to 16 for all sexualities? Question 2, that's question 2. A, 1994, 2, 2001, 3, 2008. And then question 3, when was homosexuality decriminalized? We've got 1967, A, B, 1982, C, 1997. And question 4, what year did the World Health Organization declassify being gay as a mental or behavioral illness? There's 1992, 2002, or 2012. Question 5, what year did the World Health Organization declassify being trans as a mental health or behavioral illness? A, 1999, B, 2009, C, 2019. Question 6, when was Section 28 repealed in the UK? 1993, 2000, or 2003? Number 7, when did it become illegal in UK workplaces to discriminate on the grounds of sexuality? And we've got A, 1973, B, 1993, or C, 2003. Question 8, when did it become illegal in UK workplaces to discriminate on the grounds of being trans or transgender? A, 2003, B, 2010, or C, 2012 and 13. Last question, when did equal marriage become legal in the UK? 2004, 2014, or 2020? I think we've had 2 people who have completed the poll, so I think that you're the only people who can see it. So Josie, if you want to participate when we go through it, that will be absolutely great. So can Beth and Jonah, can you see the
Results, yeah.
the results? Brilliant. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm not going to show you I'm not going to show the questions again. Okay, so we've got 1969 as the year that the Stonewall riots took place, and yeah, you're absolutely right. It was 1969. Sorry, I'm just trying to move my cursor around a bit so that I can see. Okay. Yeah, 1969. The age of consent was legalized to 16 for all sexualities.
I thought it was 2001.
It was 2008, in fact, because that was in Northern Ireland. It was sooner. It was earlier in other parts of the UK, but for all sexualities, it was 2008. In 1994, it was reduced from 21 to 18, but in 2008, it was reduced it was legalized in Northern Ireland. Homosexuality was decriminalized in the UK in 1982. It was 1967 in England and Wales, 1980 in Scotland, and 1982 in Northern Ireland. So in the whole of the UK, it was 1982. Question 4, the World Health Organization declassified being gay as a mental or behavioral illness. In 2000 and, sorry, I'm looking for all the answers in here. In 2002. And in terms of trans being declassified, it was in 2019, which is shocking. Section 28, which was brought in 1988 as part of the Local Government Act, and it prohibited local governments from promoting homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. Not that local authorities actually had that permission or had those powers in the first place. But it prohibited local authorities from promoting homosexuality. And as a knock-on effect, all schools stopped talking about LGBTQ plus issues in schools. And it wasn't until, you're right, 2003 that it was repealed in the UK. It was repealed in Scotland in 2000, but 2003 in the whole of the UK, in England. Question 7, it became illegal in the UK, in UK workplaces, to discriminate on the grounds of sexuality. In 2003. It was part of the workplace discrimination legislation on the 1st of December. Question 8, it became illegal in UK workplaces to discriminate on the grounds of being trans in 2010 with the Equality Act. And equal marriage became legal in the UK in 2020, which is when it became legal finally in Northern Ireland. In 2004, the Civil Partnership Act came in, and in 2014, England, Wales and Scotland it made equal marriage legal, but it wasn't until 2020 that it became legal in Northern Ireland. Okay, any comments or any questions about that? I'm just going to check the chat. Yeah, I think that for looking at the comments in the chat, I think the shocking thing is that so many of those dates are really recent. As we can see, right? You know, very little happened throughout the 70s and the 80s. And so, yeah, and there is still way more to be done. So I'll make sure that those statistics are sent as part of the PDF for people. Any other comments on that? Okay, so just looking at allyship and how we can be good LGBTQ plus allies. So thank you for attending this morning. This is kind of part of the, I guess, education. around LGBTQ plus matters. There's plenty of information out there. Listen to LGBTQ plus voices. So being an ally is great, and it shouldn't be the queer community's role only to educate people, but don't talk over the queer community's voices. And when you make judgments, question your assumptions. Are you making assumptions based on observations, based on presentations, based on things that you've heard, based on opinion rather than on fact? And language is a really powerful thing, and a kind of easy win if we are more and more aware of our language. So try to avoid using gendered language such as hello lady. So it's easy to say everyone, folks, colleagues. There are plenty of alternatives. And of course, don't ever out anybody in terms of their gender identity or their sexuality. If you're not sure how to refer to somebody, ask them respectfully how they would like to be addressed. And when you make a mistake, which you will do, correct yourself, apologize and move on. Don't make a big thing of it. It's not about you, it's about the person that you're talking to and interacting with. And always challenge LGBT-phobic language and banter. It isn't banter. People will use banter as an excuse to be unkind, homophobic, biphobic, transphobic, and it's not okay. And celebrate and commemorate LGBTQ plus events. So here we are at the beginning of Pride Month, which is a celebration, but however, also time to commemorate people who have gone before us in the struggle. And we've got LGBT History Month in February, and then various days of visibility. So for example, Trans Day of Visibility on the 31st of March, Lesbian Day of Visibility, 26th of April, Ida Hobbit, so International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Intersex Phobia and Transphobia, 17th of May, various Intersex Awareness Day, 26th of October, Trans Awareness Week, in November, Trans Day of Remembrance on the 20th of November. So there are many, many days and events in the calendar that you can commemorate. In terms of educating yourself, I've got a few selected recommendations and links that we've got here. So Future Learn is a bit like the Open University, Glasgow University's website for many free courses, including some on sexuality and gender identity through the ages. And there is a recent blog around Pride Month 2021, so worth having a look at, a quick read. If you look on the Stonewall website, which has a range of resources, there is a list of, I think, 10 documentaries on LGBT rights, which, yeah, many of which are talking about the rights of UK and international LGBT countries around the world. So I would recommend having a look at some of those. And also Stonewall has a number of LGBT in Britain reports, most of which were compiled in 2018. So there's a health report, there's a trans report, there's also the school report, which was 2017. But have a look at their website, because there are lots of statistics in there which can be very useful if you're challenging people's opinions around things that they might have heard. Statistics are often a useful challenge. And then you've got ILGA, which has information about LGBTI association rights around the world. So you've got world and the Europe one, and they're listed by countries. So I would recommend having a look at that as well. These three publications that we've got the pictures of here are two of them, Gender and Queer. Those two books are graphic books, which are easy reads, but very comprehensive, and Life Isn't Binary, by Meg John Barker as well, which we would recommend. But they are just examples, as I said. And in terms of listening to LGBTQ plus voices, I would recommend going to the Beyond the Binary exhibition, because much of it has been curated by members of the queer community, and their voices are very much in evidence there. You'll see that picture there that I've included of the sticker campaign that you might have seen. I'm assuming that everybody else here is Oxford based, so you will probably have seen some of these stickers around Oxford, and they also feature, and there's an activity, I think, in the exhibition. Is that right?
Yeah. There's the huge phone. Jonah, I don't know if you're in Oxford or not, but we've got a life-size trans phone box. So it's the colours of the trans flag in the middle of the exhibition, and people can add their stickers in the support of trans rights. And it's a beautiful thing of beauty.
Yeah. Absolutely, it is indeed. Thank you. And we've actually taken some of that display, or the stickers idea, and shown the film actually to some of the young people in our services over in Cambridgeshire, and they've been making stickers against hate in some of our youth groups.
That is so amazing. I'll let Stickers for the Win, the activists behind it. No, that's incredible. And if they ever want to come down and visit, I know it's quite far, we'd be really happy to give them a private tour and get them stickering.
Oh, that would be fabulous. Thank you. We'll hold you to that. We've also done it as an activity, a social activity amongst the staff at the Kite Trust.
Amazing.
Yeah, we've shared the short films. So absolutely, you've got LGBTQ plus voices right there in the exhibition.
Oh, thank you.
For people who can't attend the exhibition, I've given the link to YouTube, the My Generation films, which are made by Fox Fisher, who is a trans activist, and there's a whole range on any topic that you might want there, ranging from health to young people, school, myth busting. Some of those are really good. Yeah. I've given you the link to Gallup, who have published a report on hate crime against transphobia, which is quite new, 2020, worth having a look at. And then I included the interview with Oprah Winfrey. It's on Apple TV, so not necessarily accessible to everybody, but very powerful, what Elliot Page says, and worth a look. And we've also included our podcast. So the Kite Trust, at the beginning of lockdown 1, set up a series of interviews, which we then actually put into podcasts with LGBTQ role models, and our young people interviewed them, asked them about their achievements, asked them about things that they might have recommended to their young selves, what they have been doing to maintain good mental health. As a whole world of information there, and a range of contributors. So I would recommend having a listen to some of those. And then I've also included a TED talk by a person called Susanna Temko, who is intersex, who talks about their experience of being intersex. So I think just a range of suggested voices that you might want to hear, and by no means comprehensive, they're just a few. that you can access pretty much free of charge. Any other suggestions that people might have or recommendations? Okay, thank you. I will move on. With some information about pronouns, I've included that website link where you can actually devise your own name badge with your pronouns. It's a very interactive website, so I would recommend have a look at it. And then that chart there is for, well, I'm a linguist, and so I really like having information about language. So you've got the more traditional and better known binary pronouns there, and how they change within a sentence. And then you've got the non-binary choices of so they, them, their, which is probably the most common, has been used in the singular, was used by Shakespeare in the singular, and we use it all the time in the singular. So if people say to you that they can't manage it, actually they probably do without thinking about it. And then you've got the neo pronouns underneath there, so they, sie, am, for example, and then a few examples there on the right hand side of how they might be used. Themself, you might also see themselves as an alternative in the reflexive. And you'll notice that when using they and them pronouns, that the verb will then change. So Sam Smith has, but they have. So that the verb will correspond with the pronoun. Any questions or any comments on that? You will make mistakes, as I said earlier, but correct yourself, apologize, and move on. And here are just 4 different approaches to responding to banter or prejudicial language and discrimination. You may feel confident to respond, and you may not need to have a script, if you like, or something to hang your response on. But sometimes it can be a really upsetting experience, and it's useful to have a few stock phrases or a few approaches to use to respond to prejudice. And so even if you potentially feel confident, you might know somebody who isn't, who would benefit from having a bit of a script. So please do share. This is something that we share with young people. Okay, and we are now, we have a few minutes. So any questions or anything that people would like to share, because I'm aware that we have a range of expertise here. So please do share your expertise.
I was just going to let you know, Bethan, that we've received, I was opening this morning post, I've been sent loads of stickers for the phone box, and there's one letter that's come in from Transjoy Cambridge. We've got lots of lovely stickers.
Oh, brilliant. Excellent.
Yeah, so we've definitely got Cambridge representation.
Fab, that's good to know. Thank you. Well, we hope.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
I was going to say, if you wouldn't mind going back to the slide with the pronouns, please
Sure.
may I check with you how to pronounce some of them? The one beginning with X in particular towards the bottom of the slide. I've seen that written down.
Yeah.
And sometimes used as a title as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to say it.
So the title is MX, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've heard that pronounced as mix.
Okay. Thanks.
But the XE here, I think, is pronounced as they, the same as the ZE above it. But
okay.
Somebody else may have heard it differently.
So the ZE and XE are both Z.
That's how I've heard it.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, because
That's
I've
okay.
been nervous about using them in case I use them incorrectly or say them incorrectly. I mean, thanks.
Has anybody else heard it differently? Because I'm kind of aware that
that's all I've heard.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just running a tap. I've got to go to the next event quick in 1 minute. So I just wanted to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Josie. I will send you the recording.
Yeah, just to say, Beth, it's lovely to have Beth and Jonah. But we're picking up so much on our videos that we post. So we're getting kind of up to a couple of hundred watch videos afterwards of our event. So hopefully, I'm sure this will be of great value to a wider audience. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Thank you.
I'm going to dash, but thank you so much. And Beth,
thank you, Josie.
I'm going to go and take that picture for you now, Beth. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josie, and thank you, Bethan, too. That was really insightful.
All right, speak to you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you all very much.